Hari Om, Namaskaram, Assalamu Alaikum, peace and goodness. Today I want to talk about a topic that is, I think, difficult to talk about, but I feel again it's necessary for people of all walks of life, especially people who are involved with the world, because I feel like for them or for us, it's the most difficult thing to talk about, especially if you consider yourself a spiritual person, earnest follower of some spiritual path. And in Old Path Unity, we talk about all traditions. So we'll be covering all those in today's video. But the topic is the kind of dissonance between the spiritual teachings of rejection of materialism. Not rejection of materialism in the sense of pointing out that it will not fulfill you. So the dissonance between that and how the modern world works, like how most people live their lives. Right? And I want to point out first, so we'll go through each tradition and explain kind of how the tradition points this out. And then we're going to go on into translation into why it's so difficult to understand that in today's world and what we can do about it, if anything at all. So I'll start with the Vedantic traditions, the Eastern traditions, because I feel like they point this out. They emphasize this a lot more. And so, for example, in Vedanta, it's very apparent, this teaching. In the Gita, it is said specifically to withdraw your senses. And in order to do that, you have to lower your attention to sense objects. Right? Sri Krishna makes this point explicitly. So withdrawing your senses is called pratyahara in Sanskrit. And so going after sense objects means things that give you pleasure, right? Those are what sense objects are. That disrupts your pratyahara. So if you're obsessive about anything, even like a concept, then this disrupts your pratyahara, and then obviously your dharana, dhyana, of course. But it disrupts your ability to go forward and increase your understanding, reduce your delusion, and all of these things, right? And one thing to note is that in all Vedantic traditions, Shankara tradition, Ramana tradition, even Madhava tradition, all three traditions, this point is acknowledged. It's all emphasized in these traditions throughout, despite their differences, right? So that's one thing to note. It's also mentioned in the Gita that the fire of desire, so to speak, is increased with the addition of ghee, right? So desires. So as you increase your level of desires and satisfy them, that will plant the seed of a new desire, which will manifest itself in your psyche and lead to more pursuit of desires. So it is a self-stimulating cycle. And in a nutshell, that's what samsara is. It's really not any different than that. It's simply the fact of observation, if you will, that desires, expectations of fulfillment from desires lead to more desires. That's it. That's pretty much the whole thing. In other Eastern traditions as well, of course, the Buddha talked about this so much. He said, "Anityam, anityam, sarvam anityam." Everything is temporary, right? Everything meaning pursuit of sense objects, of course. Right. So that is very much emphasized in the Buddhist teaching. It's emphasized in even Abrahamic teachings, very much so actually. But for some reason, people miss it, or it's there. It's there. For example, in the Gospels, or rather in the Bible, it is stated that the eyes are not satisfied with seeing, and the ears are not satisfied with hearing. Right? Because if your eyes were satisfied with seeing, then supposedly you would have the vision of God. Right? You'd have the eyes of God if you were truly satisfied. Right? Same thing with your ears. But we live in a world nowadays where everything you see with your eyes is constantly changing. I don't know if you've ever been to a basketball game, but in a basketball game, they constantly have something to keep your attention. It's not just the basketball. Like, right, it's a t-shirt toss. It's the mascot's doing some kind of dance, or there's always music playing, right? I mean, any store you go to, right? There's always music playing. Why? Why? Because you can't handle silence? Is that it? I don't know, but it's there. Right? So it's kind of feature of our world that things are just constantly changing uh, in our day-to-day lives, in our experience of our senses. But right, but this takes it is a decision, right? And it's a binary decision, meaning if you put energy into changing circumstances or changing stimuli rather of your senses, then you will lose satisfaction in them. This is the point being made because that which is unchanging is said to have the turiam, or the anandam, right? Because it is said that what is changing, what is temporary, that is unfulfilling. It's also said in the Gospels. Jesus says in Matthew, you cannot serve God and mammon. Right? Mammon being literally money, but also means generally temporary things, right? Worldly fulfillment. Because note it, for example, when Jesus asks Simon Peter to follow him, right? He doesn't say, "Follow me and bring your fishing net. Follow me and bring your family." He just says, "Follow me." He just says, "Follow me," and Simon Peter, being the obedient and open person he is, just gets up and follows him. So, and brings nothing with him. So it is in this nature that you must follow Jesus. And he also emphasizes, in other areas of the gospel, that what you sacrifice for my sake will bring you great rewards. Even the things that are most dear to you. It is stated there, but it's missed, overlooked, more so underemphasized, maybe. But it's there. It's there. In Sufi tradition, of course, this point is very much emphasized. For the true Sufi, the dunya means nothing to him. He is beyond the dunya. He lives for Allah only. And this is perfectly clear for people who walk that path, and bless them for their great people. Even the Christian mystics, Saint Francis being the most obvious example, being that he voluntarily gave up his lavish lifestyle, similar to the Buddha actually, but voluntarily gave up the riches of life to literally follow Jesus and imitate his character. So all over the place it's emphasized. I'm sure in other religions that I haven't mentioned, it's there. I just haven't looked as much into them. But the concept of religion itself necessitates this point, meaning if you were just fulfilled with everything, then you don't need religion. Why do you go to the church? Why do you go to the temple? For what? What is there? Because the fact is that this unseen reality, the realm of anandam, is not apparent to you because you don't feel it all the time, right? If it was truly, aham brahmasmi, if it was truly that, you would feel it in this very moment. You don't. You don't. Yet it remains the underlying reality. So you do this because you're unfulfilled. That's the whole point. Otherwise, why would you go there? There's nothing there for you. Really. It's just, some rituals and practices. For what? For something that you cannot even see? For something that you cannot experience? If you go and you feel something, it's a very good thing because you're feeling a fraction of this anantam, right? You're feeling a fraction of it. So it's a very good thing, actually. But you would only go there because you feel unfulfilled. Otherwise, there's no point. Right? So, given that this is a foundational spiritual teaching in all religions, now, that brings up the point. So if you take this to heart, oh, really, I won't actually find anything out there. What do I do about it? Here comes the difficult part. All of your hopes, dreams, expectations, pursuits of pleasure, all of that, it doesn't go away. It won't go away. It won't go away unless it is resolved all in all. So whatever you and I wake up and dream, I wish things would be this way. I wish I had this, which is very natural, by the way. This is not some kind of, monastic condemnation. Oh, how silly he is for running after these things, which is very common, by the way, unfortunately. But it's so natural. It's so natural, right? So, in the Gita, Shri Krishna, when Arjuna does not respond to the images of victory and wealth that will be gained through winning the battle, when Arjuna does not respond to these things, where he's still distraught, that's when Sri Krishna becomes worried. Worried meaning like, okay, this guy he has a psychological problem, right? Right. So if you reject these pleasurable images and desires and dreams in this state, you're not actually letting yourself live, right? Because it's so fundamental to you as a human being. It's very natural as well. Yet at the same time, it actually won't fulfill you. So the tough thing to really deal with is that when you're looking ahead to your future, which all of us do, right? All of us dream about, fantasies in the future regarding career, family, pleasures, whatever. That we're looking ahead to unfulfillment. Oh, that's just what our life's going to be. Well, there will be ups and downs. I mean, it's an adage of life, right? People always say there's ups and downs of life. But ultimately, desires can only end in one or two ways, really. And that's, you don't get what you want and you're disappointed. Or you get what you want and you give rise to the new desire because you had expected it. You expected the pleasure out of the fulfilling of the desire. And the implication is that the seed of desire lives in the expectation, right? So it is self-propagating. So you'll propagate that cycle until you say, okay, enough of the expectation. How long will that take? I don't know. In some ways it's up to you, in some ways it isn't up to you. But whatever you have stored within you, whatever hopes and dreams, this is a yogic point, by the way, that because whatever is stored within your psyche, within your unconscious that you cannot see, 95% of your psyche, right, what you cannot see, it's going to come. And it's going to manifest itself. And it has to manifest in either unfulfillment, which is to say disappointment. I didn't get what I wanted and I'm disappointed, so I turn my mind to something else. Or I get what I want, I expected it, I got it, I'm fulfilled for a temporary amount of time, I move on to the next thing. And that has to happen n number of times until one day, by a strike of lightning, by God's grace, by your own conscience, who knows, one day you say, okay, enough of this. And there's no telling how long that'll take. You don't know. It's not apparent. There's no certainty in that aspect. It's just, but that's the thing, they have to play out. All of the desires, they have to play out. That's why you're here, to some extent. You're here for that reason. So, on one hand, fulfilling your desires, with expectation, will never fulfill you, truly. Yet, on the other hand, you have all the desires which have to play out in some way. So, what better way to state the human condition, at least from this perspective, right? But in this dilemma, is there hope? Is there hope? Yes, there is hope. Why? Because all of the spiritual masters, the great spiritual masters, in spite of this truth, came to guide us, came to propagate their wisdom for us, for those who didn't know how to navigate this. So they came for our sake, and they invested in us, right? So it's up to us to accept that into our lives. But the fact that they came indicates that there is hope. And so if we continue to live our lives in a dignified way according to the great teachings, then there's hope for us. There's hope for salvation. There's hope for realization. There's hope for peace and unity. So I hope this message wasn't too negative. The major point being that in spite of this contradiction, in spite of this dissonance, so to speak, there is hope. There is hope. So thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.